Welcome to the Point Man Podcast. This is a mic'd up men's group of 4 Catholic fathers challenging each other to be the point men for their families.
I am a fighter. I am a fighter.
Welcome to the Point Man Podcast, Season 5, Episode 3 on godly friendships. We're joined here with our guest and friend, Dr. Chris O'Neill, the Director of the Office of Marriage and Family, the Archdiocese of New Orleans. Before we jump into today's show, let's do a quick shout out to our sponsor and we'll get into the Bible verse.
Okay, so this season of The Point Man is brought to you by Triton Stone. Please visit tritonstone.com for all of your stone needs. They also handle fabrication and installation. So if you're doing a kitchen remodel, bathroom remodel, any kind of remodel that requires stone, please visit tritonstone.com.
Boom.
Thank you.
All right, jumping into the verse. Today we're pulling from Psalm chapter 133, a song of accents of David. No, sorry, scratch that.
Psalm 133.
We're going to do Psalm 133.
Let's do that song.
Let's do that instead.
We'll do that one instead. Okay, so we're going to go back to the top on that one. How good and how pleasant it is when brothers dwell together as one, like fine oil on the head, running down upon the beard of Aaron, upon the collar of his robe, like dew of Hermon, coming down, like the mountains of Zion, upon the mountains of Zion. There the Lord has decreed a blessing, life forevermore.
So if you are joining us via audio, you don't have the luxury of seeing Chris's ferocious beard and Clint's strong. It's a strong beard.
Strong.
It's a strong beard.
When you
but
put it
it
next
pales.
to...
But you put it next to Chris, it's a ferocious
It pales in
beard.
comparison.
Do you guys put oil on your beards?
No.
I used to.
Well, you
We
should
talked
check it
about
out. It
that.
sounds delightful.
Yeah.
I might just grow a beard. I'm letting my wife know. You're being warned. I'm growing a beard to put oil on it.
Just so you can pour
Yep.
the oil on it.
So I'll give you guys an update later. Let's do a quick check-in. So, Clint, why don't you kick us off, my man?
Oh, man. I'll avoid using the word, but very
Busy.
eventful life going on right now.
B-U-S-Y.
Yeah. The kids are starting up baseball and softball. We've got scrimmages and games and practices. I think I'll be at the ball field maybe 5-6 days a week for the next couple months. But all is well. It's great to see the kids out there playing. It gives me a little bit of that fatherly pride to see them out there. It's just it's wonderful. So, and I played baseball growing up, so it's kind of handing it down to the kids is really, really awesome. So it's been a lot of fun.
Right on.
We have a retreat coming up this weekend, so prayers for that. I know, depending upon when the episode drops, if you're listening, just keep the work that we're doing of faith and marriage in your prayers. The couples that we're serving and the speaker couples who are giving their yes and helping out on the weekend. So it's great. And then right now my oldest, she's in college. My second oldest is a senior in high school, and already the year is starting to wrap up. They're getting so close to the end. So. Things are happening, things are moving, but it's good to be here, and I'm so glad that Chris is with us today. Good friend, back in the days the JP2 Institute. If it wasn't for this guy right here,
Oh, God,
I
here
don't
we
know
go.
where I would be. He helped me out tremendously out there. With I'm sitting there and taking notes in class with these. I'm talking rich, theological, sound, philosophically, and just infused lectures, and I'm just sitting there frantically writing every word that comes forth from the professor's mouth, and then I look over.
Chris is just
With
putting oil
with
on
a
his beard.
death
He's just
grip,
like-
a death grip on a little stubby pencil.
I'm
just
just
writing as fast as
just
he can.
frantically trying to just consume and capture, and Chris is just kind of laid back with the pencil, just kind of twiddling his fingers as if like just basking in the glow, like, yes, continue, I've got this, and I'm
Yeah.
like, what? Anyway,
It was
So-
all a show.
Yeah, right.
Like, my handwriting's so bad that my notes are useless, and when I write, it takes up so much of my energy that it distracts me.
He's
I
being
can't.
humble. The boy was
No,
just
it was really
absorbing
true.
it.
I would get distracted every time I tried to take notes. I'd miss everything. So I'm like, well, I just have to get what I can get, and that was that.
Well, we had some classmates, Christina, where you are. Thank you very much for all your note taking.
She had fantastic
because she
notes.
had
Thank
a
God for her.
laptop and she would just like type it
Yeah.
all up. It was brilliant.
Yep.
Anyway, so that's a little check in
Right
and a
on.
little reminisce.
check in on. So baby girl just turned 2 yesterday.
Oh,
So
that's right.
she's a big girl now, I guess. Going on 22, and so I've been on the road a lot. And this semester, Lauren had like a stroke of genius. Really, she's like, you know what? If you're not going to be here a ton, and we've got active boys that are, just, shuttling from practice to practice, she's just like, I'm going to take a season, just pull them out of sports, which I was like, what? That kind of hurt the pride a little bit, but
Yeah.
we're just doing like kind of a family reset to structure, like really get the prayer life in order,
Yeah.
and then go back to sports.
Strong.
So that's been new, but it's good. And the kids were starting, like the boys are starting to like have a little bit of attitude, and when we pulled back a little bit, it's interesting. Like now they're kind of integrated, just better moods. A lot of stuff is just getting ordered before we can, from that foundation, hopefully reinvigorate the sports and
First things first.
Yeah.
press the gas. But right now it's like, all right, brakes. And so that's been new. It's been good. We're starting to see the fruit there. And part of that is like getting the rosary back online versus like coming back from practice. Everyone's exhausted, shower, homework, everyone's in a bad mood. And then try and pray the rosary. People like rolling their eyes, like, like that's not. It wasn't working. So now it's a little bit more orderly, which is good.
That's great.
So that's my check-in. Chris, how are you, man?
Yeah, life is real interesting right now. So, you guys, everyone knows y'all, but my oldest is 20, and she's in Rome right now. She's,
Oh, nice.
by the grace of God, she's studying a whole semester in Rome, and she went to Greece, and she got a chance to go to Poland for a weekend, and it's a huge consolation. I've never had an adult child before, and and she had her struggles, and we've had our struggles as a family, like everyone does. But it's really a consolation to see all the pieces like coming together for her, and she's becoming a more integrated person, and taking care of herself and managing the stress and difficulties of being in another country and having to do school and having to be overwhelmed and no one there to rescue her, and like to see her just thrive. Thanks be to God, we have a good relationship, and she asks me her advice, and just to be able to talk with her like as an adult and not be, it's not my job to make sure her prayer life is in order or make sure that she's getting to class, it's like none of that's mine anymore. It's like she's steering the ship, and I can just be there, and it's a huge consolation, and it's helped me, I think, order my younger kids, like to understand like what the end looks like, and kind of how to temper being overly controlling or overly, but just that balance that you need to be a good dad and to manage a chaos of a family. It's been really good. I'll tell you one little story. She was staying at this convent in Poland, and they had this philosophy professor was giving them the tour, and he started pouring them vodka, the kids.
It's a good move, yeah.
She sends us a text, and she says, "I love vodka," and she says, I love all humanity, and I'm satisfied with all my life choices." And I'm like, maybe you need to dial that back a little, And but my wife and I were like, it's got to be a parenting win that your first time your kid gets really drunk is at a convent in Poland with the professor, who's studying, John Paul II and everything. So, that was a win.
I am satisfied with all my life choices.
Yeah. She was feeling really well. She was feeling really good.
That's good.
So
That's jolly. Yeah.
So that was a win, and it's just been a consolation. So yeah.
Oh man.
Thanks be to God. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole thing of parenting has been crazy because my oldest is 19, and it's like, I've heard it said one time, parenting, you go from like being a cop to a coach to a consultant, and knowing when to make those transitions. I feel like I could have done better in those transitioning moments in their aging, But yeah, it's the whole analogy of using the bike when they're riding the bike, and you're teaching them how to do that, and you have to let go of the seat.
Yeah.
But that's going to increase their chances of fall. But yeah, that's also going to increase their ability to actually learn how to do this on their own.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've got to be, and then when they fall, when they've had a little bit too much vodka in Poland at a convent, you can kind of insert a little wisdom into it, like
yeah, drink some water, kid.
Drink
That's
water.
what you probably get
probably
some
have a little
food in
something
you.
else to eat, maybe to
Yeah.
kind of help you out there. But anyway, but
Yeah.
it's a beautiful thing, and it's something that we're called to engage in, and something that we can
Yeah.
continue to learn, and we're going to continue to learn. It's funny because our first ones are at that age, but then we've got other ones behind them
Yeah,
that's
it's
like
stacking up,
and it's
yeah.
not like, oh, we've got this figured out now, because
Oh,
I've got one that's an adult. It's like, no, whole new ball game,
Yeah, Grace is a whole other story.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, a whole other kid. I remember even,
which is great.
and that was true right from the beginning. I remember when we had 3 daughters in a row, and the first one, when Claire was born, I was really worried about having a girl. Like, I didn't know if I could handle another girl in my life, and but then you kind of get over that, and like, okay. And so then when Grace was born, I was like, okay, boy or girl, I can handle it. When the third one was, I was like, please let it be a girl, because I didn't need anything new. Like, I didn't need any, like, upset the apple cart. But when I remember thinking that, I think, oh, I know how I've had a girl before, so another girl, I already know what to do. But Grace is a whole other person than Claire, and Bridget's like,
right.
and Bridget isn't in between.
Yeah.
It's not. There's like a third whole other world, and every time another kid comes in, it's another world, and you're always kind of being knocked off your balance by that, and then you have to learn how to adapt. And I feel like that's been just a tremendous, like, not knowing what you're doing and fumbling around has been, formative. It's helped me to grow in all kinds of ways that I didn't expect. And
It's being a student of, it's being appreciative of, and it's also not taking the things that we've learned and just assuming on another, just because, like, you can learn from what we've learned from our first children, right? But then there's a way of applying that without trying to, like, make them into the other person or expect things of ourselves or from them. It's helping them to unfold the mystery.
I think my wife would like it if I was doing the cop coach thing. I think I jumped right to consultant like day one. She's like, "Are you going to jump in?" I was like, "It's a bad choice." If you want my opinion.
yeah,
He's
sorry.
2. I think he needs more direction than that. Or what do you
It's
say?
like, well, he'll learn. Right?
He'll figure it out.
Yeah,
The stove's hot. Figure it out.
yeah.
Why don't we jump in? Like, I know you gave a little foundation of Chris's background, like how you guys knew each other, and obviously the diocese knows you. Chris just finished the big retreat for the
men's conference.
conference,
Yep.
which was actually on Godly Friendship.
Yeah. This is great. So we had this seasons on friendship, and then it was interesting because I remember, I think outside when after the conference was over, at the men's conference was over, we're sitting outside, and it's like Mike Phelan and Dr. Tim Hogan, and we're just kind of like talking about, like, I thought we were going to be limited in content when we were given this kind of framework of friendship. But oh my goodness, like, we could have gone an entire weekend at least, going deeper into this understanding of friendship and what the Lord is calling us to, and with His invitation to become friends. So and then you made the comment too, like when we were kind of organizing our thoughts together, like, you were saying specifically, like, the friendship is the mission, like the mission is friendship. So talk about, like, as you had also been kind of talking about this conference leading up to it with your podcast, and then with everything from the conference itself, like, there was some Holy Spirit inspiration coming in to kind of lead this into friendship. But looking back, and I want to kind of get into your thoughts on this.
Yeah. Well, thanks. So, the men's conference is always this time of year. It's always the Saturday of the first week of Lent. So right at the beginning of Lent, one of the guys said it was like getting all the coals together. There's that image of, the Christians are like burning coals, and when you gather them together, they all fire each other up, again, and when they spread apart. And if you get isolated and alone, you get cold, and so that's what we try to do with the men's conference, gather together, get everyone fired up, and then send them back out to the mission that God is calling them to in their parishes or whatever. And, I thought I really wanted to do this theme on friendship, but my worry or my fear was that we would think that as a shallow topic, because when you're in youth ministry and you're in high school, it's always about friends are friends forever, and and we're holding hands and kumbaya and all of that, and it's like to to me, it was clear to me that there's a crisis of friendship happening among men, not just in the church, but in general. We're really broken and isolated from one another, and like our spirit and our soul and our psychological and our physical life, they all function. They're designed to be within a network of close-knit friends. And so if you're by yourself, like you're psychologically not healthy, physically not healthy, emotionally not healthy, spiritually not healthy, and that's going on all over the place. And to try to call men to the adventure of friendship, because true friendship isn't easy. Your friends are not just like the friends you have on Facebook or on Instagram or social media. Those are all the people that just agree with you and think you're smart and think they like what you have to say. But when you're actually in the room, with other men and other people, you're always bumping into people who are challenging you, who disagreeing with you, who think you're an idiot, all of that, and getting pushed and pulled. And you can't, when you're physically in the presence of other men, you can't just click away. You can't just separate. You have to kind of go through a bit of an ordeal. And that's what was meant by the iron sharpens iron.
Right.
Our thoughts and our ideas, our prayers, our relationship like hones us and makes us better. But the iron can't sharpen the iron if they're not physically close to each other, like if they're not actually in relationship with each other. So there's a lot to be said about that. And if we take a shortcut and think, friendship is easy, or friendship isn't a task or a work, or one of the things I think happens, for example, is
just real quick on that, striking the iron. I think, especially with guys, I'm seeing it now, real time with my boys. Like, not only is it they're bumping up against each other in their thoughts, their temperament, their character, likes, dislikes, but also physically.
Physically. Yeah,
and
they're
then
irritating each other.
You're
and
like,
they're
oh man, they're biting, kick. I'm like, you're still biting? Like, yeah, because you hit me and then you kicked me. I was like, that's a rough match,
Yeah.
And I'm like impressed. I'm like, that's like that's a good bar fight, and but then seconds later they're the best friends, and like complimenting each other. I was like, oh, but those literally striking of iron, they're also growing in this brotherhood,
I mean, they're figuring out how to negotiate their relationships and how to play their roles appropriately. What it means to go too far, and what it means to go, to like you're roughhousing, with kids.
Yeah.
You have to throttle, not going too far, but also being challenging enough. And you can't do that unless you're physically and that happens verbally, like even us in the room. Like there are ways that we communicate with each other that can only be communicated by being like actually here. I can see your face, how you're responding to me. I can tell when I've gone too far. I can tell when I've offended you and I have to back off or I have to rethink or maybe like, no, this has to be said. And all of those skills are lost when all of our friendships are fractured and mediated and And
I think we're scared to actually have those hard conversations though, because if you're used to having, this is something, two thoughts here, I'm going to stack them.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Peterson had something really brilliant to say on social media. He said, that whole genre or platform or medium, whatever you want to call it, is designed for women because they can actually throw barbs and there's no physical repercussion.
Yeah, that's right. There's no danger of doing that.
If you go into a platoon hut, if you go into a sports locker room and you start throwing barbs, you also have to stand by for a punch to the face.
That's right.
And so you have to temper your words correctly.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like there's actually physical repercussions for like being an idiot, for being a jackass. In social media, you can bars all day long and then you just kind of cower. It's not an ideal platform for a man to thrive.
It's exactly right.
There's that. And then there's the other opportunity, like guys, I think, especially now with the temperament that we live in and the temperature of society, we're concerned that if we have anything but an awkward Thanksgiving conversation with our colleagues, coworkers, family, friends, that we're somehow crossing the line.
Yeah.
And we're not even close to the line.
Yeah.
And so for iron to strike iron, you actually have to strike. Like
you have to go through that awkward.
Yes.
I always remember talking to my kids they're just navigating social life, among, middle schoolers or whatever. oh, that kid's so awkward, or I don't like being around them. It's I don't want to go to the thing because there's all these, weird people there or whatever. And it's like on the other side of awkward is awesome. Like you can't, you have to go through awkward before you end up at that real friendship.
Yeah.
Because that awkward phase is when you're negotiating with each other. You're trying to, I don't know what you're about. You don't know what I'm about. I don't know what you think about me. You don't know what I think about you. I don't know what I'm supposed to say or what I can't say or what's going to be. I don't know where the lines are, all of that. And you have to go through that negotiation in your relationship before you know someone well enough and they know you well enough that friendship kind of gets started. But you have to go through that awkwardness. And I think one of the things that social media does is it protects us from that awkwardness. I don't have to be in any circles of anybody that makes me feel uncomfortable. And I can easily escape anything that's uncomfortable to me. I'm listening to a podcast. I don't like what they're saying. It bothers me. I think these people are idiots or whatever. I just shut it off and go listen to something else. And so I never have to go, but it's hard when you're in the actual physical room to just get out and walk away from a challenge.
And there's that awkwardness that isn't just with, adolescent boys and girls. There's also that first interaction when you're making friends.
Yeah.
And I've had to go through this a ton.
all the way
One,
through.
my temperament, I just don't like the social arena as much as my wife, who's sanguine or has bits of sanguine in it. I'm more reserved. So making a new friend is challenging. But on top of that, I think every human, not just me, I think every human wants to put their best foot forward when you have a new interaction.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so you want to show the individual, look, I'm this, I'm that, whether that's intelligent, I'm on time, I'm punctual, look, I'm well dressed, whatever the case is, boom, boom, boom. You're not going to show them you're funny or goofy or any of these things because that would be unprofessional, or that's not the first take you want.
Right.
And so that first interaction is always like, hey, how are you doing?
It feels fake. It feels not genuine.
And you have to
It
get
feels-
through that too.
Yeah, that's right.
And I tell my buddies, like we laugh about this now, like when you go to a barbecue with military personnel, it's so challenging because everyone wants to present themselves as this stoic robot, like, hey, no.
Yeah.
But then you spend a couple, get some vodka going, and all these guys are just straight up comedians. You're just like, oh, you're actually a goofball, just like me. Like, we're all goofballs, even though the world thinks this of us. We're actually just a bunch of goofballs, But you have to get through that awkward phase,
Yes, I remember one of the things that I brought up at the men's conference, and this was I picked up from Father Mike Schmidt about friendship, is not only just the fact that we need to be available to our brothers, right, and to be there and to kind of build that relationship and build trust and kind of break down these walls, but we also need to be vulnerable in those relationships, to be able to just not just stay at the surface, not just talk about the game, but to have these guys in our life that we can be really like a band of brothers that we can connect with and be vulnerable to, and that we can talk about things that are difficult. And one of the things that talked about was something that Father Mike brought up, which was powerful. When in John's Gospel, chapter 13, is the Last Supper, right? So this is 3 years of ministry work. This isn't the first supper. This isn't the second. This is 3 years of suppers, right? And they're sitting down, and Jesus says to everybody, "One of you will betray me," and they have no clue who it is.
Yeah.
We're like, it's Judas. Like, it's clearly we know it's Judas.
for
Like,
2,000 years.
Judas the whole time, right?
This whole time, but they have no clue, to the point where Peter's like,
Give me a time machine. I'm going to tell them.
right, exactly. Peter's like John's like, hey, go find out who is it? Ask him who it is. And then people they're even saying like, is it I, Lord? Like, they don't even know. They think that is it. Wait, they're questioning themselves. Like, did I do something? What's wrong? Did I do it? So they have no clue. But like, the point is that you had Judas, who was available to the Lord. You had Judas, who was available to literal saints around them, but he wasn't.
Kept it hidden.
He kept it hidden. It was vulnerable. He wasn't vulnerable to them. So, like, just imagine what would have sounded different if he would have been like, guys, like, listen, or at least one of them, like, bro, Peter, like, I don't get what he's talking about. Like, this, he's supposed to come
Judas,
in.
It's not what you're saying isn't so much that the other disciples didn't notice. It's that we're good at hiding stuff.
Yeah, very good.
Judas is probably struggling the whole time. He didn't let anybody know.
Yeah.
He didn't say, hey,
I need
I'm having
30
a hard
pieces
time.
of silver.
I'm
Yeah,
having a hard time with this. Like I really feel like I need to go turn this guy in. Or
Like
feel
I thought we were going to have like somebody's going to
I
take
thought
down the
this is
Romans.
not-
He's about to die to the Romans.
this is not what I thought and whatever. And he's not sharing that apprehension. He's not sharing that worry, that lack of faith. He's not sharing.
Yeah.
And so nobody can help him. Like nobody. And so then he bears this burden all by himself until he ends up falling away.
Big
and
time.
Yeah.
That's part of it. Like the vulnerability is like allowing yourself to actually be seen.
Yeah.
So people actually know what's going on. And we don't, that's what true friendship really looks like. It's not all my buddies that I just like to hang around with and make me feel good. It's like, you know, the people who know me and know what's going on and know what's good and what's bad and, you know, are sustaining me and calling me out and all of that. And it's a really complex thing and we're losing it in our culture. We're just losing it. Like,
Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of things. I mean, one of the easy things is that to point to, it's almost boring to point to it now, is that so much of our relationships are mediated through media. And we're not actually in the room, so we're not getting all of the information that we could have by someone's punching me in the face or giving me a look.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that came up to me as we were thinking about that particular issue is, you know, John Paul II one time speaking about pornography was that the problem, he said that the problem with pornography is not that it shows too much, but that it shows too little. That that it only puts forward one dimension of the person, and you don't see the person when you see pornography. You just see one aspect or one side, and it puts that up, and it fractures that person from the rest of. Looking at a pornography, you're just looking at the sexual value. You're not looking at an actual woman. Having an actual woman in your presence is a whole different experience. And it occurred to me, the same thing's happening with our friendships. Like our friendships, our social media, the mediated friendships.
Yeah.
There's only a fraction of you that's coming through to me. If you and I are friends on Facebook, you're saying what you have to say, and I'm saying, but I don't see all of you. I just see
You're seeing a curated
one
version
aspect.
of it.
This is
One
rich.
aspect.
So like the whole thing, like obviously pornography is wrong because adultery of the heart and all that stuff like that. But it goes deeper than it. Just it's more complex, more problematic than just the adultery of the heart. It's this training of seeing someone for just one particular aspect of another person. That's not and trying to and stripping from
And we have I think the next level deeper than that is that we don't trust. Let me see how to put this. We don't trust that we actually have a capacity for complexity.
Yeah.
Like we actually can understand another person, that we actually can gain insight.
Yeah.
Well,
and
why?
see.
Why do you think that's lacking?
Woundedness, hurts,
Well,
disappointment.
Like
Sin.
there's so much about our culture where we try to simplify things, right? We try to break things down into their smallest parts and then put them all back together again, you know.
Well, that's also American culture. Like create
That's
the
American
computer,
culture.
ones and
Renee
zeros.
Descartes.
Ones and zeros, like
Republican,
everything.
Democrat. Like
Yeah. Simple. Like we think, and we feel like we need to simplify things. Like think about a priest preparing a homily, and he might have, you know, how many homilies have we heard when we say, "Oh, the Trinity is just too hard for us to really understand"? It's
Right.
like bull.
Yeah.
That's bull. Like God made us to be able to understand Him. It's not easy to understand the Trinity. It's not easy to understand Christ. It's not easy to understand, you know, but it's not impossible. Like we're made to be able to understand complexities. Like God gave us an intellect and a will and everything
That's right.
that is capable of understanding Him. And we deny it constantly. We constantly train ourselves to be like,
So here's
know?
here's a question too for you though. So I think there's a narrative, especially in Christian circles, that women have this intuitive, the woman, the genius of woman. They have this ability to understand complexities, whereas guys are maybe more of the
Always
simple
simple.
creature.
Yeah.
But I would say like you can be vulnerable in and guys will grasp situations
it.
too. But why do you think that is? Like,
well, so I mean, I think,
unwillingness to be vulnerable.
yeah, I mean, I think there's this. One thing that I want to actually think a lot about and try to talk more about is the role of attention. You know, like the trope is that men can't understand women, right? okay, well, on a certain level, that's true, right? That women are not don't intuitively make sense to us. Like we don't just we don't just start interacting with women and then it's like, oh, I know what's going on there. It's like you go, I don't know, I don't understand what's going on there. And that's, but men have this amazing capacity to pay attention, to focus their attention
Yes.
on something that matters to them.
Yes.
And when they focus their attention on something that matters, then everything else sort of falls away. It's like the guy's watching the football game. He can't hear the baby crying because he's dialed in, right? And when he dials in, he understands the thing. He figures it out. He looks at that car and he just keeps paying attention to the car till he finally figures out what's wrong with it. And he can do that with his wife. Women attract our attention, and if we pay enough attention and we stay dialed in, we'll start to see and we'll start to understand what she needs and what makes, what's going to be helpful to her and what she wants and what's going to make her laugh. Like we end up figuring out what makes our wife smile. Like we end up figuring out how to surprise them, and we know it's going to surprise them and they don't know, because we can come to understanding by paying attention. And our culture fractures our attention constantly.
Yeah.
But anything. Here's something I've been thinking about. Anything that you pay attention to gets richer.
That's right.
Like if you come home from work and spend 10 minutes just looking at your front lawn and just pay attention to your front lawn, and you did that every day, just paid attention for 10 minutes every day, your lawn would just get better. Like it would just get better because you would notice the trash and you would notice the lawn
weeds
that needs to be cut and the weeds. And you would think, oh, you know what would make this better if I trim that, or if I and you would take care of it. If you don't pay attention to your front lawn, it just falls apart. You don't even notice.
But there's a follow-up to that. Not only paying attention, but also having action on the back end.
Yeah.
Too.
But the attention's the
right.
first. The attention's the first. Facebook, Instagram, media, political campaigns, they all know that if we can capture your attention, we'll get richer.
This is where we've talked about on this show a couple of times now, Colonel Boyd's OODA loop, which stands for Observe, Orientate, Decide, and Act. Mm-hmm. And it's applied to fighter pilots predominantly, but the Marines have adopted that for ground warfare. But I think you can apply this to your front lawn and marriage, friendships.
Yep.
Observing, okay, where am I falling short of being a good friend?
Yeah.
Or
just what is going on?
Or a rich husband. Yeah, what's the landscape here?
Yeah, what is happening here?
And then you orientate yourself to the friction point or the issue at hand, and then you decide, okay, what am I going to do about this?
Yeah.
And then ultimately you have to take action. But in America, we act and then we reflect. It's like, no, like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Well, no, you shouldn't have. You're right. You probably should have thought about that first, and then come up with a good course of action, and then implement that action, and then get it out.
That's so interesting from what I've been thinking about, because it's not that our capacity for action hasn't been taken away, because someone that's say an advertiser that wants you to buy a candy bar, they want you to take action. Mm-hmm. There's always a call to action, like do something, and it's always being emphasized in our culture that you could do something about. Are you hungry? Buy a Snickers. And it's like, go do something. And so like the doing part is hyper emphasized in our culture. Like we know that we can do something about it. There's always something you can buy. There's always something that can solve your problem. All you have to do is click right here, but we haven't, but the orienting part and the attention part is what's fractured. Yeah. And so when we are constantly, anything that we pay attention to gets richer, but some of the things that we pay attention don't make us richer. Like, YouTube gets richer by capturing our attention.
We're losing.
But, if I pay attention to my friendships, not only do I enrich my friend, but that friendship enriches me.
That's right.
My life is better because I pay attention to my marriage, because I pay attention to my kids, and then my action is.
So we're spending ourselves in areas that are not
we're fractured. Our attention's completely
rewarding.
Fractured, I think, and that's why I think that's even psychologically why a life of prayer is so important.
Well, that's holiness, because
trains you to attend
a whole person, fully integrated, not fractured. So even the word itself is talking about a rich life, like to be a whole person,
a wholeness. Yeah. Let us be, in the Eastern Rite of the church, a lot of people don't know there's an Eastern Rite, but the liturgies of the Eastern Rite, one of the refrains that you'll hear the deacon say all through the liturgy is, let us be attentive. Let us be attentive. Like at every important moment, the deacon calls out to the people, be attentive, be attentive. And it's like, yeah, that's like, if we can pay attention to God, if we can pay attention to, and focus our attention on the good things and the truly good things and not allow it to friction, then those things deepen and they become better. Our friendships become better when we pay attention to them. And I think we're having a friendship problem because at least one aspect is because our attention is fractured and we're not paying attention. We're not spending the time. We don't want to go to the parish cook-off. Like, I don't want to go to to go to that. Some guy invited me to the barbecue at his house and I don't want to go because it'll be awkward. And I would rather just sit on TV and watch, Amazon Prime and,
Do you think do you think there's a sense, Chris, where people it's a lack of what they're going to get out of it, or do you think it's a lack of, or maybe a feeling of being uncomfortable, or maybe a combination of both, or something else that's making guys say, you know what, I don't want to. I just don't want to enter in here.
What I want to say is that I think it's a lack of hope. I'm going to go to this person. Someone's invited me to dinner at their house. I don't want to go because they're just going to be talking about politics, or it's going to be awkward. It's going to be weird. It's going to be awful. And in the end, it's going to be a waste of my time. And I'd rather just do what I know will satisfy me. I'd rather just click on YouTube or whatever. And it's a lack of hope. Like, we don't trust or we don't believe that on the other side of awkward is awesome. We don't see that as a potential for something better coming into my life. I don't want to pay the price for something that's not going to pay off. And so I know that I'll I can just sit on the couch and let my attention be guided by somebody else, and I don't have to do anything difficult or challenging.
It's why you see a lot of friendship between men. It's just like very surface.
Yeah.
It's a narrow view of friendship is like, hey, these are like my drinking buddies. We like to drink together, and it just always remains at a very surface level. It never goes down to that deeper level.
Clint, do you think that's because they're afraid to cross the Rubicon, that if they are vulnerable, or if they do share maybe a friction point or an insight, that they'd be misunderstood, or there's an embarrassment there?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think there's something about maybe the lack of putting forth the effort.
Well,
because I've got so much going on in my life. I don't have the patience or the desire to put forth that effort. Yeah. So I'm just going to keep it at a surface, and then you and I have no commitment to one another. Mm-hmm. Hey, just see you at the next party, or see you at the bar, or whatever.
Mike,
you don't have to go you don't have to go deeper.
Mike Phelan at the men's conference was talking about this, about the friendships of pleasure that you like, the guys and he talked about, he would go 5 a.m. He'd go to this park and play basketball with these other guys that were all similar style. It was just great to go, and they play basketball. And then his wife said, "Oh, it's great. You're making some friends. Maybe we should have them all over to dinner. What's their names?" And he's like, he couldn't remember their.
I just tell him, pass me the ball.
Yeah. So. Like, okay, I'm okay with my friendship being here, but it's a risk and it's a challenge. Like, I could be misunderstood, or I could get punished, or I could be, if I say something silly or goofy, I can get ridiculed. And so, we have shame. Shame is important because it helps us to not do things that are socially not acceptable. But sometimes we're so full of shame that we don't want to take the risk that sharing something or like, hey, I'm not so sure about this. It feels so dangerous to do that we just don't do it, and we'd rather just stay in our comfortable place.
That happens to me. It's like in a social situation, I personally want to go deeper. I want to have like a meaningful conversation with people, but I pull back.
Yeah.
For fear of that judgment.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, well, if I try to go there, they're going to think I'm a holy.
You're always looking for someone else to crack that ice,
Yeah. So I definitely feel in those situations like I'm just gonna operate at this surface level and not.
And then you go home disappointed though. Also, if you're honest, you like, God, I wish that was I really wanted to have a better conversation than that, but all we did was talk about
the weather.
And then you go, I don't want to do that again, and then you don't go.
So I'm reading this book right now.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm reading it. It's called Anna Karenina. It's like the Leo Tolstoy
Yep.
book. I saw, I took action probably without reflecting first, like best marriage books, top 5. So I was like, oh.
Anna Karenina, my
Yeah.
wife hates that book.
So I'm like halfway through it right now, but one of the characters, Levin, has his brother over. His brother's dying, and they're just talking about the weather. And he goes to bed, he's like, man, I wish I could. He's like, this is probably the last
Exactly.
time instinctively that I'm going to see my brother, and we're just talking about the weather.
Yeah.
But none of them wanted to cross the Rubicon and actually
Exactly.
talk about, like, you're dying. He's like, and he knew his brother was like, yes, I'm dying, I'm scared, and can you help?
Yeah.
But they just stay superficial, and they both leave dissatisfied.
Man,
yeah.
I went through that with my dad. My dad's way of saying, "Hey, I love you," was, "How's your truck running?" You know, and then we would talk about the weather. You know, like we never, you know, and I mean, he died this way, asking me about, you know, it was never like getting into our personal feelings together. And I tried to go there, and you know, was met with some pushback, and so it just defaulted back
Yeah.
to the surface. You know, and he would all, you know, and of course he would tell me that he loved me, and I always knew that, but it would always come across as, you know, how's your truck running? It's like, Dad, my truck is running fine. Like, if it's not running fine, I take it to the mechanic and he fixes it. Like, you don't have to worry about my truck. It's
Right.
okay.
Right, but that's just that touch point. You
Yeah,
know,
it
like,
is. It's like-
yeah.
It's what's safe to talk about.
what's safe to talk
You know,
about.
it's almost like, you know, sometimes, and maybe this is what Pope Francis sometimes means about, you know, making a mess of things, you know, that, you know, we could use with a few more bras, like crossing the line and getting into a fight with somebody a little. It's like nobody wants, like, that doesn't happen. Like, you don't have bar fights anymore, right? Which is good. You know, we're not in a very violent culture or whatever, but, you know, the fact that I never have an interaction with another guy that has a potential of becoming a tussle, there's something impoverished about that. Like we're never wrestling about.
But
You know what
also
I mean?
the
I'm not saying that we should go around and
reconciliations,
start
though-
fights, but I'm just saying, like, there's so much that's built up that protects us from any kind of, you know, potentially violent, to go back to what you were saying about women, and you know, we avoid any potential danger in our social that we play it so safe that we're just perpetually bored with our relationships.
That's a great point, and that is something that is so wrong with our culture and society today, is that people are scared to stand up and get into that tussle.
Yeah.
People, you know, generally speaking, we are non-confrontational. We don't want to get in an argument with anybody. We don't want to rock the boat. You know, you see something over there that's blatantly wrong, but you're like, you know what? I'm not going to engage into that. It's not my place. I don't want to start an argument. And so we let these like crazy things that are happening in our world happen.
Yeah.
And people are not standing up against it.
That's right.
And saying, no, this is wrong.
Right.
We're not going to allow this to happen, because we don't want to get
Yeah.
into that conversation.
Sometimes I think that like, you know, everyone keeps talking about how politicized, for example, our culture has become. It's like the one safe place where you can say really offensive things, as long as you're saying something in the political arena, and you can like throw barbs across and feel good about yourself by putting down, you know, the other side or whatever. But like in the room relationships with actual people that you care about, getting into an altercation with them, that's not safe. You're not going to do that.
You equate to like an autoimmune disease, you know, like autoimmune diseases, a lot of times people look at it like, how did this happen? And there's, you know, cold plunges are taking off. Like 2016 is like a big thing. It still is. It's starting to gain some traction. But one of the benefits from these cold plunges, people are realizing, is that they cure autoimmune diseases.
Yeah.
And they start pulling the onions back, or the layers back on the onion. They're like, oh, because a lot of humans will go from climate-controlled house to climate-controlled car to climate-controlled office to climate-controlled car to climate-controlled home. And they never expose themselves to like the adversity of the weather or
the
inclement
aspect that you
Yeah.
have to deal with
to
that.
hot, cold, you know, and having to like tussle with extremes. And so they just kind of stay in this comfort zone. Well, a lot of those individuals have autoimmune disease now when they're doing these cold plunges, they're getting healed.
Yeah.
And because their body's actually, which is designed to fight outward, the autoimmune diseases are fighting inward because they don't have anything to fight.
Yep.
And so you look at the church, we're destroying ourselves internally,
Yeah.
talking about
By
nuanced
staying
things
too comfortable.
by staying too comfortable. But we're not, the church isn't designed to be comfortable.
Yeah.
Like you're
Same
supposed to
with
go
fasting.
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Same thing with fasting.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's like really interesting research about, you know, fasting is now becoming like a cancer treatment.
Yeah.
You know, because you know it's
becoming a health fad.
You fast long enough, and your body starts to actually eat itself, and you think, well, that's a horrible thing. But your body knows how to choose what parts of it. Starts with the most damaged parts, and it protects the more viable parts. And so, like, fasting becomes a way of is like a healing because you're designed to not always have food available. Like you were not. That's not how you were evolved. That's not how you're. You're supposed like that suffering and that difficulty is something that you're capable of. That's sort of what I meant by we're capable of complexity. We're capable of understanding, and we're afraid of it because it's painful, because it's difficult, it's uncomfortable. But you know, you can do this. Like you can have friendships. You can have
And I
real
think there's
friendships.
a lie, and I'll pass you the baton,
No,
Jason.
no.
It's like in the veteran community, when guys get out, there's an element of, I mean, the metamorphosis that I've starting to see with, you know, my buddies, even my own reflection, like it's a while, but there's a element of self-righteousness where like, well, you don't have the same experiences that I've had, so therefore I'm going to misunderstand you. You're a banker. I came from this background, so therefore we don't have anything in common. Let's just agree not to agree, and I'm just going to go watch Netflix. You watch Netflix, and then we'll be good. It's like no. Like he's a banker. You might have been a Green Beret or a Ranger or a pilot. Like cool. You're still humans.
Yeah.
And there's so much common ground.
Yeah.
But there's that element of self-righteousness, just like you don't understand me, I don't understand you. Let's just not even waste our time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I think of the just the excuses that we're placing to avoid conflict, to really wrestle, because we even going back to like wrestling with God, like Isaac, right? That we need to Jacob, right? Jacob wrestling with God. His name's changed to Israel, right?
Yeah.
And so that's like even like reading the Bible, like and not just like part of the Bible that sounds good, like just maybe the New Testament, but like actually going back to the Old Testament, just like saying like, God, what were you doing? Like, what happened with that? Like, you know, and just hearing the full story and like, but you've got to wrestle with this story. It's because it's your story and it's our story. And if we just edit out the Bible to the nice pictures and the moments when Jesus is like welcoming and shepherding you in, that's great and that's beautiful, but you got to know the whole story to like, and then there's that wrestling that is like part of our spiritual growth that we've got to go to prayer with, like, Lord, what did you mean by that? And then because we need to take stock of what's going on in my own heart, like when my mom passed when I was 6, like what were you doing, Lord? Like,
what's the meaning of
what
that?
was the meaning of that? Like, why? Like, if you're a good father, why would you take away my mom? And then he could almost answer the question, just wait, I'll take away your wife too.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And like, how do you wrestle with that? Like, do you just ignore it? Do you just throw away the faith? Do you throw away God?
Yeah.
Or do you just completely go?
Or you wish it away and say,
or you
well,
wish-
God's going to fix that or whatever.
No, but
or
like-
you just keep that.
like
Or
you've
you
got to
skip
bear
that
it.
chapter of the Bible and just focus on
focus on like wrestle with that. And so so we're not wrestling with God, and we're not wrestling with our brothers. We're not going up and like manning up like we should in a heroic way and in a virtuous way to be able to challenge the other, and also to allow the other to challenge you, and to allow that wrestling to take place so that I can be a better man.
Exactly.
But also
That's
to gain
exactly
clarity and insight, because a lot of this stuff,
Yes, you can't be gained without going through the
Yes.
wrestling.
Yeah.
Like the awkward to awesome, like the wrestling to
Yes, that's right.
perfection.
and some of like, at least this has been my experience, like growing up, like some of my closest friends to a T, like I've had it out with them,
Yeah.
you know, like there's, like whether it's, and even a good marriage, like if like I remember
Yes.
years ago Romney when he was running for president, is like that someone asked him about his relationship with his wife. He's like, I've never had a fight with my wife. It's like, and you're a robot and you're weird. You know, it's like I'm not going to trust
I
someone that's
can't-
never had a fight with his wife. You know,
Yes.
it's like, what do you mean?
You
Yeah.
know, there's a principle even in engineering.
Yeah.
There's a name for it. I can't remember it. but that that when motion is constrained, when there's a tension, you gain precision. Like when something can just move freely, it's imprecise. But when it pushes against something, I mean, think about like a rifle. You want to lean against something that won't move, and that constrains your movement, and it makes you even more precise. And that's what happens when you're in an interaction with a friend who's opposing you, who's pushing back against you, who's not letting you just have whatever stupid idea, half-baked idea. Like, that friend requires you to develop your idea and think better. And it doesn't mean you have to just find the common denominator. The fact that you're pushing against each other makes you both more precise.
Yes.
And it makes you think more clearly.
And we know when we don't do that, because like Clint, what you were saying about, walking away from these relationships, or the part of you were saying from the book where like there was this moment where here talking about the weather, and you knew, like we can all look back and be like, I didn't step into that fight. I didn't step into that engagement, and I lost something because of that. Like there was a part of me that like I left something on the field. I didn't give all of myself, and I'm empty, or I'm ashamed because of that. Like I wish I would have said something. I wish I would have done something, but I didn't. I said nothing.
Yeah, I think it comes down to a lack of faith in the fruitfulness, and to use a different word, that relationships are fruitful. That when people come into relationship with each other, there's another thing that comes about that's valuable, and that's what contraception is about. I mean, in the talk about big moral questions, it's like we don't want the fruitfulness of the relationship but that mentality that leads to, say contraception in that, I mean, and not even to go down that road of the morality of that, but that idea of the fruitfulness of relationships have to be controlled.
Yes.
And a sense that what comes out of a relationship might not be valuable, and so we need to be careful. That infects us. But if we had hope, and we had, we entering into a relation, like you're entering into a business relationship, and you're bringing someone on board who brings something to the table that you don't have, and you get excited about what can come about if we do this together, then it's like, let's get into it. Let's do this. Let's bring to the table what we have, and let's wrestle with each other, because I have a hope that what will come about is going to be so much way more enriching than whatever I started with. And I think we have a real lack of hope, and that is making us not willing to accept the risk of the friendship, and it's just safer and easier to stay at home and sit on your couch.
I want to just make a point too. One is that like the whole thing of the importance of friendship and relationship, like is the fact that like we're created in the image and likeness of God, who is a Trinity. And so you have this perfect communion of persons, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, this relationship, right? And we're made in this image of God. And so that being in relationship with other people is part of who we are.
Yes.
It's essential to our identity, to our creation, and to our flourishing. So and like what Mike Phelan said at the men's conference, I think it was Mike, said, there's no such thing as the lone wolf. That's a farce, right? Like that's like we can be, but we find ourselves isolated, and that's what we become victims.
He said the lone wolf is the lost sheep.
Yeah.
It's like easy to pick off.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so to be able to see that, like, being in relationship, being in community, is our strength.
It's stronger.
And so that's number one. And then number two is that invitation to take that step into being vulnerable with others. To, like, even the Lord had, like you look at his gathering, his circles, he had the 3, the 12, and the 72. Like, to be able to have, like, his closest were Peter, James, and John. And, like, and then he'd bring the disciples, the 12 apostles together, and then he would pull the 3 closer in and then do something with them. Like, we need to have those guys in our life that we're going to be vulnerable to. And I know that one of the problems I think we have is that, one, maybe it's not modeled to us. We don't know what that looks like, and so we don't know how to act out ourselves. Or the other is that we're afraid that by being vulnerable, because we want to put up this facade, this strong, this strength, and that we think that that's what's going to attract people to us, and that's what's going to make for a good relationship, is putting this facade up. But it's that vulnerability, that intimacy that opens you up, that allows another person to step into that space. And then there's this this relationship that goes deeper. So to be able to find those people in your life that you can start, sharing more from your heart, and what's going on, the struggles, the temptations, the challenges, and how you can become stronger from that.
I think just one
That's
last thing about that is to be honest about that, because if you go down that road, it could be bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can entrust yourself to someone and get smacked in the face. Like that's a possibility too, and people have, and that has happened, betrayals happen,
Yeah.
It happened to Christ.
Yeah.
He shared his heart and he was betrayed, and we have experience. I mean, that does happen. We live in a valley of tears, and but protecting ourselves from every bad thing that might happen is a much worse mistake to make.
It's the autoimmune
than
disease.
to not risk, than not take. It is a risk. You're gonna, if you share your heart with your friends, you're taking a risk. But if you become the kind of person who learns how to do that consistently, you become a man of integrity who brings your true self to the table in all your interactions. Sometimes you're going to get bumped and bruised, but on the whole, you're going to end up much richer. You're going to end up much, you're going to accumulate around yourself, those small couple of friends you can really get into with, and that whole circle will happen. But we should be honest. If we're going to call men to that kind of adventure, like, you could break a bone, you could get some bumped up, but bloody nose. But we shouldn't be too afraid of that. Like we should just be willing to accept the consequences and learn from them, so that because one of the things that can happen is we can overshare. We can get how many men's groups you've been in, and someone's like oversharing way too much detail. Like, well, that's an error, and then you've got to kind of tune from that. So I only say that is that we should just be honest about it, because it is a genuine challenge to try to live this way. And I can think it way more than I can do it.
It's a genuine challenge, and it's even harder in our day and age. In a time when we can be so somehow connected more than we've ever been in the world with these things, but then it's causing us to become more disconnected.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm holding up the phone. That's right. Sorry.
Yeah.
For the.
Yep.
Well, this is a good stopping point. I guess just go around and do tax and takeaway. Clint, we can kick it off with you, man.
Great episode. Deep waters. Like you guys were saying, I mean, there's a lot more content to this than it seems. And I love what you're saying about conditioning yourself to engage in the battle.
Yeah.
Instead of just always stepping away. That to me is really important, that we jump into the arena, that we engage in the struggle, and yeah, I mean, to me that's just an important lesson, something that I need to, like you said, instead of thinking it, really put it into practice, put myself out there more, be more willing to be vulnerable, and just I think I would see so much more benefit from that than being in situations where I hold back. Like you said, you go home at the end of the night and you're like disappointed, like, man, all we talked about was the weather. We had so much opportunity to go deeper, and we just decided to talk about football or whatever. So
I think the same thing for me, Clint. I feel the same way. Like I look back and like some of the moments with Elise and I in our marriage together, where like she, resisted what I was suggesting, and then the wrestling that we had to, figure out or whatever like that helped me. That helped me to understand, like, she wasn't just like this yes person. Like she was like this resistance, this wrestling, like helped me. Like it allowed just so much growth to take place. And it would have been easier in the moment to be like, just why don't you just trust me? Why don't you just listen to me, kind of a thing. Like, why are you so whatever? But it's like, no, I needed that. Looking back, I'm like, oh my goodness, like all those moments helped me out tremendously. And then I realized that like I'm holding that back with my friends. I'm not doing the same level of like, because why? Am I afraid that it's like it's going to fall apart or they're going to stop hanging out with me? But it's like, there's something there that I got to like let go and die and just trust that I need to step into those spaces and be a little bit more with love and, and respect and all that. But to be able to not be afraid to step into that the awkward or the challenge that is begging me to say, because how many times if somebody's like went up against you on something And then it took you a while, and you look back, you're like, man, that's right. I was completely off base when I did that or said that. I'm glad they said that. I'm glad that tough love that I needed to hear, but I didn't know about it at the time.
Before I shared the text and takeaway, I just want to acknowledge what you said is really beautiful, and you can't just get there and say, oh, and then my wife pushed back. The fact that you set the conditions where in that relationship, it was good to push back.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't this like,
was
no,
invited.
no, we don't push back. I know everything, you know,
Yeah,
whether
yeah.
it's in friendship, marriage,
yeah.
business, like you can't be a tyrant. You know,
Yeah,
you have
yeah,
to have that
yeah.
condition to allow for that exchange of ideas. So that's beautiful. I just want to
praise God.
share that. And I think, you know, every time that even like this past year, I was reflecting with my wife, like she's very social. She's like, hey, what if we do this? And I've put myself out there this year more than the year before and the year before that. And they've all been blessings.
Yeah.
They've all been blessings. And I told my wife, thank you. I was like, you know, I'm not inclined to, I'm the guy that wants to watch Netflix or just read a book, you know, like I don't want to go out. And cause I'm like, I have friends, like I'm good, but it's always been a blessing. So there's that. And then I love what you said, Chris, about the, just the precision.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was such a cool analogy. And it was a big takeaway for me, just like you're going to be honed, you know, whether like you're saying like, I needed that. When you have someone that can push back and say, and let's get it tighter, you know,
Yeah.
I think that's great. So
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Yeah, I think for me, what comes away from all of this, and you know, I've been thinking about this because of the men's conference, so maybe it's primed for this. But to me, I think really for myself, and I think maybe other people out there, is to just be okay that you're bad at this.
Yeah.
Like, be okay with that. Like, you don't know what you're doing, and you're going to get into social interaction, and you're going to put yourself out there. It'll be awkward and clumsy, and you know, you'll do it wrong, and you'll be bad at it. Like, you're bad at doing this. Like, we're all bad at doing this. Like, we've lost as a culture the skill of this.
Yeah.
And so, like, just be okay with that. And, you know, a swimming pool is a dangerous place, but you're never going to learn to swim unless you get in there. You can't like wait till you know how to swim before you get in the pool. Like you just got to get in there and kind of flail around and, you know, have enough people around you that keep you from drowning. But then, you know, so not be stupid about it, but, you know, just be comfortable with the fact that you're bad at it, and be comfortable with the fact that it's clumsy and awkward, because on the other side of the awkward is something really awesome. And so if you have hope about it, then you can just try. And I think I need to hear that. And I think a lot of guys need to hear that too.
that's awesome. And I loved how you framed that with hope. I think that's really a key here.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
Real pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, really a privilege.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great episode.
Yeah, thanks for everyone listening to the 3rd episode of Season 5, Point Man Podcast. God bless. Have a good one.
Man, what another great show today. I want to thank all of our listeners for spending the time with us. I want to challenge you, if you've enjoyed this, please share this show with another husband or father that you know, or leave us a review on Google, Apple, or Spotify. We'll see you next time.
I was born a fighter. I rise up like smoke from a gun.